Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to continue reading Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche and thinking about this book, trying to understand it, doing another studying stream. Before I get to my thorough analysis, let me read the whole paragraph from my memory. I've already memorized the second paragraph, and that's the way how I study. So I memorize one paragraph, then I think about it for a couple of hours. Then when I see that I can fully understand what is in the paragraph, I move on and memorize another paragraph and think about it for another couple of hours. Anyway, so let's start with this second paragraph. How could anything originate out of its opposite? For example, truth out of error, or the will to truth out of the will to deception, or the generous deed out of selfishness, or sun-bright vision of the wise man out of covetousness. Such genesis is impossible. Whoever dreams of it is a fool, nay, worse than a fool. Things of the highest value must have a different origin, an origin of their own. In this transitory, seductive, illusory, and paltry world, in this turmoil of delusion and cupidity, they cannot have their source, but rather in the lap of being, in the intransitory, in the concealed God, in the thing in itself. There must be their source and nowhere else. Such mode of reasoning discloses a typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all times can be recognized. This mode of valuation is at the back of all their logical procedure. Through this belief of theirs, they exert themselves to their knowledge, to something that in the end solemnly christened the truth. The fundamental belief of metaphysicians is the belief in the antithesis of values. It never occurred even to the wariest of them to doubt here on the very threshold, where doubt, however, is most necessary, though they had made a solemn vow, the omnibus dubitandum. For it may be doubted that firstly, the antithesis exists at all, and secondly, that the popular valuations and antithesis of values upon which metaphysicians have set their seal are not merely superficial estimates and provisional perspectives. Besides probably being made from some corner, perhaps from below, through perspectives, as it were, to borrow an expression current among painters. In spite of all the value which might belong to the truth, the positive, and the unselfish, it might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will to delusion, to selfishness and cupidity. It might even be possible that what constitutes those good and respected things consists precisely in their being insidiously related, knotted, crocheted to these evil and apparently opposed things, perhaps in being essentially identical with them, perhaps, but who wants to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses. For that investigation, one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have different other tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those prevalent hitherto. Philosophers of the dangerous, perhaps, in every sense of the term. And to speak in all seriousness, I see such philosophers beginning to appear. All right, now let's read it slowly. Yeah, I decided that I'm gonna fasten my studying streams since I've realized that talking for 2 hours, 3 hours about one paragraph or even half of a paragraph is too much. So my goal is here to understand the ideas, but it's not only understanding of these ideas. So I'm practicing English. I'm learning to speak and I'm learning to think in English. So for me, some of these ideas may be just cues which I may use to look back at my personal experience and connect some events, some thoughts which I had before with language which I may use now, since most of my thoughts and ideas are still, they're kind of in Russian language. So whenever I want to talk about philosophy or metaphysics, I often find myself translating from what I knew before. And I can't use really sophisticated and subtle language when I want to emphasize certain things. And this work, this slow reading and acquiring, obtaining all this vocabulary is very beneficial to my practice. So it's not just understanding of what Nietzsche wrote. It's more about practicing my personal, practicing, like using my own language, my own experience, and obtaining the vocabulary which may be necessary for thinking. Also, as you see, I train my memory, memorizing paragraphs and repeating them a few times until they stick. It doesn't take a lot of time, usually, to memorize one paragraph. I do it when I walk. So I walk to the source for water. It takes 30 minutes to get there and back. And I take just one paper, for example, something like this. And on the way there, I memorize almost like all of it. And then I repeat it for 3 or 4 days, once a day, sometimes twice a day. It helps me to think about those things which I study. And also it helps me to remember it, like to hold it in my memory. Now I can recite more than 10 poems, which I've learned, which I've been learning for the last half a year. And also I can recite like the preface of Beyond Good and Evil and the first few paragraphs. So it's like I already memorized like all these. And it took me, as I said, just, I knew preface before, but this is like the first two paragraphs. I started memorizing them since the beginning of this month. So in June of 2021, I memorized these two paragraphs. And I guess if I memorize two paragraphs each month, yeah, that's enough. The point is how to keep all of them, how to not forget all these, whatever I memorize. And kind of obvious. It's repetition. I repeat from time to time, sometimes once a week, sometimes even, poems, for example, which I memorized during this year, I repeat them a few times a month, and I can keep them in my memory. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and it's so fascinating. I mean, there's so much exciting poems. Sometimes I use them to change my mood if I feel sad, or if there's some tiredness, especially physical tiredness. So I use poems, and they stimulate my you know my brain, my imagination, and yeah, it's a very convenient way of changing my mood. But let's go on and read this paragraph. So the last time I stopped here, I've read the first part. It was the last studying stream, and today I'm going to go through the second part and read each sentence. Yeah, I want to stress it a little bit more. So it's not important actually what Nietzsche wrote in these books, since I already got through it many times, and what I want to understand is the language. So it's not ideas, but the language, the structure, the syntax, and I want to be able to use a kind of similar syntax in my writing. So I developed my style through analyzing the one of the greatest styles in writing history. All right, so for it may be doubted, firstly, whether antitheses exist at all, and secondly, whether the popular valuations and antithesis of value, upon which metaphysicians have set their seal, are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives, besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below, frog perspectives, as it were, to borrow an expression current among painters. Yeah, I'd like to, not to focus on each phrase or clause. I'd like to consider in sentences. So previously I was doing lots of extra work, just taking one phrase and trying to understand the meaning of that phrase and whatever. Now I'd like to focus on a sentence and understand, like try to relate it to my personal experience, how I can understand, how would I interpret the whole sentence. Yeah, but probably there may be the subject, right? He raises a doubt about antithesis and about the value of popular valuations and antithesis. So he basically says that there may be no antithesis of values, and by antithesis of values he means basically he means all these things, like thing in itself, concealed, God, and transitory, and the lap of being. So antithesis. But it's very hard to actually to say. Let's try to figure out what I understand by antithesis of values. Popular valuations. Yeah, it's hard. He says at the same time, like popular valuations and antithesis of values. And he puts them in one and the same category. So let's consider some good, right? So he talks about the good and the good in itself and pure spirit. Is it popular valuation? And how it relates to the antithesis of value. So something good antithesis of value. Okay, let's. If this is the hard one. I mean, the word. Yeah, I understand what is the word what the word antithesis means. There is some thesis like health is good. So antithesis will be health is not good. Yeah, in this case, he says maybe a popular valuation that health is good, but metaphysician says like health is, there's spirit and your psychological health has nothing to do with your physiological health. So an antithesis of health is going to be your magnanimous spirit, which doesn't care about your body and which considers body as something dirty and filthy. All right. So that makes sense, probably. So popular valuations and antithesis of value. But he says popular valuations, but I'm not sure that it's really make a lot of sense here, since they often contradict each other. Even in Nietzschean time, they probably contradicted each other. So antithesis, it's not the popular valuation, it's exactly unpopular valuation. So popular valuations actually are necessary here. So if he would say, the secondly, whether antithesis of value upon which metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives, besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below, frog perspectives. But yeah, maybe it was different in his time. I mean, maybe by popular valuations, he doesn't mean what I think is popular now, since popular in my mind it associates with some kind of mainstream culture, and in mainstream culture, or mainstream whatever. So in mainstream culture, we see that all these popular, now it's like the most popular things, whatever, beauty, money, fame, and antithesis of them will be the opposite things. So they will be, not ugliness, of course, but you just wouldn't stress appearance. You will say like real beauty is, inside of your inside, like it's your inner beauty, which is make like a lot of sense. And here he says like antithesis, they are, yeah, it's like it's not beauty, it's like beauty of your spirit. And also health, right? It's not like you don't care about health, you uh, say that health is not as important as your spirit. So your spirit is good, and it's not clear what is meant by spirit. Oh, it may be more or less clear. So we may think about morality and about being a good person, and assuming everything what he said previously about this antithesis between cupidity and covetousness, selfishness, unselfishness. So selfish means good for Nietzsche, but popular, yeah, I guess, like it's now we see that selfishness is, and again, who we, it's very, again, it's so complicated. But still, when we consider mainstream culture, when we say that most people are possessed, obsessed with money, with their appearance, nobody actually wants to be smart. Since it's so easy, if you want to be smart, there's lots of things you can do. And all you need to do is just do these things. Essentially, you read, you learn to read, you learn to write, you dedicate enough time to thinking, and you become smart. But if you want to look smart, it's a totally different, you know, thing. So if you want to look smart, you may spend 5 weeks or months just making one video, which is going to present you as a smart person. And then, you spend maybe not 5 months. I made up the number. You may make one short video, 5-minute video in a week, where you may take all these, scientific research, combine them, say a few words from yourself, and then make a video, make some pictures and say, look how smart I am. I know, whatever, know this science, or I know this argument. And you may present an argument from different views, give some examples, and say, this is something smart, and I am smart since I present you this. But then it's like when you have a conversation with somebody like that, you'll see immediately that all they know is just a bunch of nonsense. So they may give you all sorts of information, all sorts of knowledge and explanations only if they have a computer, if they have the internet. So whenever you have a real conversation, you see that without their phones, without the internet, they're completely lost. They don't know anything. Well, they may tell you something that they learned, but it's usually it's so unnatural. I mean, most of the time, like, you immediately see the difference between appearance and essence. And in essence, he doesn't care about how you appear. For example, yeah, maybe I care a little bit about appearance, and that's why I, still have this kind of confusion. Not all the time, but yeah, I see there is some element of confusion in my studying streams, so I can't really get rid of this this thought, this drive, this affect, something that makes me care too much, or not too much, but more than necessary, about how I appear for a viewer. Since my goal is here, again, I'm working on myself. I do this job just to learn something, to understand better some ideas. And I see the benefits of this work, and I like it. But again, there's some kind of drive which makes me upload these videos on YouTube and not chase subscribers, but there's some desire to have more. And I always argue with with this desire. So I'm trying to consider it as a kind of separate entity, and I try to think, why the hell like I care about it? It's not necessary. It's not what I want. I want to be wise. I don't want to look wise. And the more I care about looking wise, the less wise I am. So the point is to get rid of this care. But, it's a hard work. I guess it takes a lot of time, especially when you use foreign language. I wouldn't probably have problems with my native language if usually when I talk in Russian, I don't care too much. But sometimes, again, I still, it's so difficult. Anyway, popular valuation. So now I guess I have to interpret these popular valuations and antithesis through what had been said previously. So it's difference between truth and error, or the will to truth, the will to deception, or the generous deed out of selfishness. So for Nietzsche, the will to deception, selfishness, covetousness are real things. Well, I guess generous deed and pure sunbright vision are also real things for him, but he wants to say that essentially they have the same, they may have the same origin, so they're not different in their essence. They're different only for on the surface. All right, let's go on. So superficial estimates, merely provisional perspective. He puts them in one like Nietzsche puts popular valuations and antithesis of value in one category, and says metaphysicians have set their seal. Yeah, are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives. Besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below, frog perspectives, as it were to born as personal current among painters. Okay, once again, the idea here, what may be doubted? So there are two things, right? The first thing is the existence of antithesis. Antithesis, right? So it may be considered as kind of, again, it's an ideal. So we may say that there's reality and it is as it is. So right now, at this particular moment, I can't change myself. For example, I'm aware that my language is a little bit, probably too much. Yeah, unclear. And I want to speak perfectly with eloquence and elegance and all sorts of stuff. But I understand that I have insufficient vocabulary and there's not enough practice. So I need to speak more, be more careful in my speech, learn to avoid all sorts of fillers, learn to use good grammar, to be clear. But in reality, it's still not the case. And I'm aware of that. And also my pronunciation isn't clear as well. So I have worked on my pronunciation for, I don't know how long, maybe for forever, to make it closer and closer to uh, natural pronunciation. Even if I will not be able to achieve this goal, I still always like to speak like a native speaker. I still may develop it for the rest of my life, just to learn and to improve it gradually, little by little. And eventually probably it's going to be better than now. It's going to be better than now. But the idea is now it's not the case. And I may accept myself as I am and just gradually grow and learn to do everything better. Or I may say, no, it's like what I am now, it's unacceptable. It's not even real. So what's real, it's kind of, and I may make up an ideal. I may say, okay, I may watch a video or find some guy on the internet who speaks perfectly. And then I may say, this is real. This is what I want to be like, what I want to sound like. Yeah, but how it connects to antithesis of values? Yeah, I guess I said something irrelevant here. But anyway, antithesis. Okay, let's take these four, where are they? Yeah, lap of being, intransitory, concealed God and thing in itself. So he wants to say these things may not exist. So this is like the first doubt. Antithesis, like firstly, whether antithesis exists at all. So he wants to say that these things may not exist. So in the origin of all these great things is in transitory, seductive, illusory, and paltry world, in this turmoil of delusion and cupidity. So, and the secondly, whether the popular valuations and antithesis of value. Okay, let's just take whether antithesis of value uh, are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives. So he wants to say that, you know, all these ideas, concealed God and transitory, thing in itself. So these may these maybe these ideas may be not so high, or you know, they may be not so magnanimous. They may be true, not just true, but you know, superficial, right? This idea of being highly spiritual person, when you try to follow some, let's say, noble, yeah, I guess noble is a better word than high. So when you try to follow some noble path and be a good person, be unselfish, be kind to everybody. So maybe this is not uh, noble. Noble. What's noble is to be selfish, to be, you know, strong, and that what was noble for many thousands of years, until we changed, you know, until we discovered this, you know, philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy, and then later religion. I guess Nietzsche doesn't want to say that, you know, he certainly divides morality into categories like slave morality and master's morality, but he doesn't want to say that one of them is better than the other. He just wants to emphasize that there's so huge, no, there's an emphasis on one of them, but somehow the other is slandered and denied, whereas he wants to say that all great things grew out of you know, this type of morality. When you find something which you think is important and you pursue your goal and your duty without caring about what other people think, without without wasting your time on something unnecessary, and protecting, of course, yourself. It's not just, you know, it may be a good way of looking at your life. So in one case, you, like when you obtain this slave morality, yeah, you may use it. And by slave morality, I mean what Nietzsche meant by slave morality, basically uh, a Christian morality. So when you love your enemies, let's say, yeah, and when you are not able to, you know, when you are hit, you are just turn another cheek to be hit again. Now, when you are able to do something, when you are able to react in a way which is, you know, when you are able to protect yourself. Okay, it's hard. I see. I'm losing track of my thoughts. I'm trying to talk about something that doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, yeah, that's I have to get through this suffering to eventually to understand better what I'm talking about. Yeah, the first time you make lots of mistakes, and then but then you see that's what's fascinating about this exercise as a whole. So you talk about it, you see how your brain, your consciousness just makes sense of something completely irrelevant, and then you turn it back, you focus on the content, and gradually you learn to understand it well, and you learn to interpret it well, and basically you learn to control your consciousness, you learn to control your mind, stay at the same, in the same path. Yeah, but once again, for me, it's just thinking aloud, an amazing exercise which helps me to practice my language, to understand better some ideas, to obtain certain vocabulary, to learn through experience, to understand my personal experience better. So I guess in my personal experience, yeah, I never actually had you know, some strong principles in life. There were some of them, but usually they never lasted for a long time. Like, I had some categorical imperatives. Well, yeah, but doesn't mean that my behavior wasn't guided by some principles. So certainly I had this idea to write every day at the end of 2011. I remember I decided to do that after reading my grandfather's diaries, which he wrote during the World War II when it started for the first half a year. So I was so impressed by his ability to maintain his diary every day, and there were some terrible conditions, and he still wrote half of a page every day. And I decided, oh, I'm going to write like in my circumstances, in my environment. It's not just, it's like I may do that. It's not a big deal. And I started writing every day. Now I try to maintain this categorical imperative. So to describe my life, what I'm doing, what's going on, to write at least one page and do it clearly. So to develop my language gradually, to make it clear and understandable, and to make it, not just clear, but also to learn to talk about things in a way which makes a lot of sense out of basically nothing. So any experience may be described so that it may be impressive. You may take just a usual day and think about it and make sense of it, and it's gonna be, maybe not interesting, but at least it's not going to be stupid. And this all depends on language. So when one develops his language to the point where he may talk about, like he may just open a stream of consciousness and observe it and write something down. You don't need any experience. You may just, your thoughts become your experience, your feelings, which you have every day, no matter what's going on. If you just practice for enough time, you are able to do that. And I would say that, it's kind of categorical imperative, and it was one of the principles I had for almost a decade now. So it's 2021, and in December, the first December, I wrote my, first daily note. Before I was writing for 3 years, some occasional notes from time to time, and there were some events which I wanted to put down to remember. Yeah, and this principle, it's kind of value for me. So it certainly has huge value. Honesty. So yeah, I guess there are lots of values. I mean, I never try to list them all, but for me, they're mostly intuitive, and they certainly expressed in my journals. I try to make sense of my principles, but mostly it's intuitive. So mostly it's there's no set of principles. After I read Sextus Empiricus 2015, I realized that all sorts of dogmas and all sorts of criteria are unnecessary. So you may just follow better, since you may change them from time to time and improve your understanding of what's going on in your life around you by adopting those criteria, those principles which you find like throughout the course of your life. So when you stick to one particular principle and you decide, okay, now this is the most important thing, like let's say, let it be honesty, or let it be whatever, some categorical imperative like writing every day. So in some situations, it may be unnecessary. In some situations, even honesty may be kind of wise. Not according to Aristotle, but there are situations when you have to lie, when lie is necessary, and or well, yeah, maybe it's not the truth, but it's not true. Maybe there are not such cases. Well, I'm trying to be honest as possible with myself and with people, but often you see that there are situations when you don't want to say like everything, the truth. You want to conceal truth for some purposes. And maybe it may be stupid, but again, so I want to say that there are some principles, and these principles, they can be revised throughout life. So in adopting some particular principle, or following to some school of some philosophical school, and trying to achieve some results, like spiritual results, trying to achieve ataraxia, or any other fancy ideals which this or that school has. Sometimes it may be it may actually hold you back from real growth, from real psychological growth, since you may be stuck, and then there's no way for you to go on. Anyway, so I'm talking again too much. I want to learn to be clear and shorter, but there's maybe it's just my attitude. So I know that if I will not talk too much, I'll just say few words about each sentence, and that's going to be it. But I want to like to sit for an hour at least. Yeah, but anyway, in spite of all the value which may belong to the truth, the positive and the unselfish, it might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will to delusion, to selfishness and the cupidity. So here are his antithesis. So it's thesis. Damn it. Thesis. The thesis is truth, positive, unselfish. And antithesis is no, for him thesis is delusion, selfishness, pretense, and cupidity. Or maybe thesis and antithesis here may be considered as life. Life is full of cupidity, full of selfishness, full of delusion, and full of pretense. Most of people try to pretend to be somebody who they are not. And the antithesis says that all the selfishness, let's get rid of it. Like you have to be unselfish. All this negativity, all this whatever is going on, uh, wars and suffering, let's just forget about it and say that it's all good. It's we are living in the best world, as Leibniz said, the best of the best worlds, and we all have to be positive in spite of all our troubles. We shouldn't be concerned with our troubles, and our spirit is more important than our, flesh. And true, again, what is true, if there's only pretense and every everything what's going on, it's mostly no. The difference between true here is like what is true is it's the real world. So what's going on in the real world, what you can see, touch, smell, hear, this is true. And for metaphysicians, the antithesis of that is going to be the world beyond, this world of thing in themselves, or God, which is the opposite of reality, which is something beyond reality. It may include reality as its part, but fundamentally it's just something different and something higher. That's the point. So reality, it's like nature. Yeah, like nature and God. There's a opposition, and thesis is nature. The antithesis is God. Okay, so in spite of all value, yeah, and he may say yeah, there are lots of value in that, of course, when you understand that, it helps to maintain kind of psychological health when you are in trouble, where there's all sorts of negative experiences you get through in your life. This positive mindset, this idea that it's all for the good, it may help you to endure, to get through all these obstacles. Whereas if you think about it negatively, if you think, oh man, it's so hard, and you complain about it over and over, it's probably make things even worse. But anyway, yeah, he wants to say like unselfishness and positive and the truth. Yeah, there may be lots of value, but it also might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will to delusion, to selfishness and cupidity. So what he wants to say is that probably it's not just there's no difference between these things, but if there's only truth, there's no life, essentially. Life is impossible. Like life itself is a delusion, right? So, there are some philosophical ideas and especially religious ideas which say that no, there's nothing at all. Life it doesn't exist. In determinism and free will, this dichotomy, which when you think about it deeply, it makes a lot of sense. So you may see that, from one side, it feels as if you have free will, as if you act independently and you may do whatever you like. But essentially, when you think about it for, a certain amount of time, especially if you read some philosophical works about determinism and the nature of the self, you may realize that all this is just nothing. It's just an illusion. Uh, Free will is an illusion, but even if it's an illusion, it makes life, kind of, fascinating. Since if you know that there's no free will and nothing makes any sense, it's probably life wouldn't evolve to the point where it has evolved right now. Since I don't know, looks as if, when you think about determinism and you understand that everything is predetermined, there's no difference between you and me and anybody else. So you stop actually considering yourself as something special, as something unique. And you stop considering time as something, meaningful, since from that perspective, there's no time. Just if it's just imagine that there's a picture, any kind of picture. Like you look at the picture, and for you the picture is stable. So it's the same picture. You look at it and you see that it's not growing, it's not developing. It's the same damn picture. So when you think about determinism, and when you understand it, you may imagine the entire life, not just your life, but the entire life of the whole universe as just one picture. And you just look at this picture. So self is just looking at the picture, which is one and the same picture. There's no differences, no changes. It's all stays at the same point all the time. And Nietzsche says, look, guys, if without delusion, without the will to delusion, which is basically free will, without selfishness, so without pretense, without cupidity, we wouldn't like evolve. We wouldn't have anything. All life. Well, again, he doesn't say that it's exactly the case. He says just maybe it's true. Let's think about it. What if it's true? And then later he'll develop some arguments. But now what's important to understand, these differences again, pretense, will to delusion, selfishness, cupidity, as opposed to truth, the selfishness, and the unselfishness, the unselfish, the positive. They may have the same or even more value for life. And to deny them and to say that all these things are bad is the sign of metaphysicians. There's people who actually, who are tired from life, of life, who wants to get rid of it. All right. And there was some idea which I was thinking about. Metaphysicians, positive, selfishness. What was it? Okay, doesn't matter. So let's go on. It might even be possible that what constitutes the value of those good and respected things consists precisely in their being insidiously related, noted, and correlated to this evil. What's the word? Correlated means. Is it the correct pronunciation? Correlated?
Crochet.
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 Crochet. Damn it. Crochet.
Crochet.
Crochet. Well, connected, right? Crocheted.
Crocheted. Crocheted.
Crocheted. All right. Related, noted, and crocheted. Basically, a rhetorical device, it's one and the same word. To these evil and apparently opposed things, perhaps even in being essentially identical with them. Okay, again, there's an emphasis that shows us the connection, right? Relation between these higher things and lower things. So for Nietzsche, they're not higher or lower. They basically stem out. They stem from the same origin, from nature. It's the same nature. And my thoughts on it, like I have more and more exciting thoughts, like as I go through this studying stream. I think a lot during the week. I have so many amazing ideas, and it's hard to even tell what kind of ideas, since when I think about them, I may just take one phrase or expression or idea and go on and think about it for a couple of hours or for an hour. And then, usually I develop some stream of consciousness on just on one idea. It looks so funny. It looks so fascinating. But then when I go and record the study in stream, it's very hard to use the same path, to use the same idea and develop it through, by using the same, basic language. But anyway, so I'm trying to tell a little bit about this language. So it's essentially an idea that language is what we call spirit. So there's no difference between spirit and language. And from that point, it makes a lot of sense. So there's language, it goes through our heads and it's growing. It's definitely, evolving through time, especially a written language. And we're just vehicles for this language. And when we think about spirit, soul, consciousness, basically what we, and these different, dimensions like God and things themselves, it's all just language. It's something that is neither biological nor spiritual. It's very hard to tell, but it's one and the same thing. That's the idea. It's like it's the unity of entire universe and consciousness and whatever. It's just the unity of language, and language develops itself through us, and we are just, like, as I said, vehicles for it. It's a kind of foggy idea, but no, you can't prove anything like that. But just, it certainly helps you to, it helps me to see the world in a kind of magnificent way. So I may, when I substitute this word like soul, language, I may see that, yeah, as language, I am immortal. As language, I am, eternal, and there's nothing that may destroy me. And if I transcend my identity to this point, so if I stop considering myself as a body and start thinking about myself as language, it immediately makes a lot of sense when I compare this mindset with mindsets that people like ancient people had when they thought about soul. So they believe that, you have to work on your soul. You have to, instead of chasing some material stuff, you have to be good and, develop some virtues, practice some virtues. But essentially, all these virtues and all these goodnesses, so it's also about this material world. You just, you interact with people, and it's not about well, there's something about language, but yeah, my idea was that working on yourself, it's working on your language. So when you consider yourself as language, when you believe that you, what you call you, is not the body, but it's language. So and this thing may evolve, and you may, obtain the most, brilliant language and develop your language to some brilliancy to the point where nobody developed it before. So this is like, again, this is an idea that, yeah, I guess there's metaphysicians who develop some worlds like, consciousness and also all sorts of hells and paradises. Hey, it's all about language. When it just takes one thing, you substitute the idea of soul, consciousness, mind with the word language, and then you work on your language, and you understand that as soon as you start evolving as language, you'll see the difference. So as soon as your language gets better, and you may track your progress and see, like again, in my case, it's all makes a lot of sense, but I understand that to get it, it requires experience. So you can't understand what I'm saying if you just listening to me and have no experience. But experience is writing daily for 10 years. Yeah, I don't think it's possible to do. Maybe it's possible to do in 5 years. But for me, it took 6 years of daily writing in my native language, and then 4 years almost daily writing in my, in English, to get to the point where I'm right now. And now it's so vague. I can't express it clearly since I have insufficient vocabulary, since most of my thoughts are still in Russian language. And whenever I want to talk about some metaphysical things, I see all this confusion and, inadequacy, which is triggered by my inability to describe what I mean. But when I when I think about it, I can see clearly what's going on, since in my thoughts, so I have some picture, I have some idea. This idea, it's essentially my experience, and it's not just experience of certain event or certain emotion. It's an experience of 10 years of writing and analyzing the evolution of my language from being completely inadequate to being almost the what's the word, invincible. Right. I'm going to do the same with English, by the way, but it's going to take maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe 10 years. I don't know. But essentially, yeah, I guess it will be clear in 10 years. So if you, yeah, exactly. You have 10 years to develop your language to the point where you'll be able to understand, since, it all makes sense only if you work on your language. To whatever I'm saying here, I understand that it's so confusing. I mean, I'm talking to somebody, but I like this somebody, it's basically my ideal of myself. So I'm talking to kind of metaphysical ideal of myself and trying to convince myself that there should be certain work. If you do this work, you understand me. But in the same time, I'm trying to express certain experience. I'm trying to share my thoughts and emotions which I had while I was going through this experience, and while I'm going through the same experience right now. And I see, now, for example, usually, yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about it as well. So now I do several exercises, daily exercises, like linguistic exercises, let's say. And one of them is, at the end of the day, I go through my daily routine and think about it for half an hour. So before falling asleep, I lie in bed and think about what was I doing during the day. And I think about it in English, and it's so easy to describe my daily routine. I mean, I start just talking about it, like thinking about it, and I may remember everything what I was doing. And sometimes yesterday, for example, yeah, I may give you an example. Why not? So I just describe what was going on, but I'll try to do it briefly. So yesterday I woke up at 10 a.m. I went to the bathroom. Then I went to the roof, and I was doing rewatching. So rewatching is analyzing 1 month from my past. So I was thinking about January 2017. And today I was thinking about December 2016. And each day I go back and try to remember the previous month. So after doing this exercise, I did physical exercises, so gymnastics and some qigong, meditation. Then I wrote an analysis of my speaking club, Sunday's speaking club. Yesterday it was Monday. Then I wrote an analysis of my lectures. No, before writing an analysis of my lectures, I went to the source to get water. Then I wrote an analysis of my lecture. Then I was watching lectures by John Searle, Philosophy of Language. It was the 22nd lecture where he talked about what was there, direct and indirect speech acts. Commissioners, what's the word? Commissives, right? So I wrote something down, some examples, how we use indirect speech acts. Like when I say, you are standing on my head, you are standing on my foot. So it's indirect speech act, since there's a meaning of a sentence and a meaning of a speaker. So basically what I want to say, just get out from my foot, or step aside. And the meaning is just I describe what's going on. And also another example is, can you pass the salt? So basically I'm not asking you about having this ability to pass the salt. So I'm not, can you, like, are you able to do that or not? I'm asking you to do that by, it's a kind of indirect speech act, but when you, doesn't matter. So I'm just trying to describe, it's not important. The point was, like, I'm trying to talk about my routine. So after watching John Searle, I watched another video, one of my conversations. Then I watched another video. Yeah, I don't want to talk about these videos. I don't want to even mention what kind of videos were there. Then I had a short walk. I had a dinner. Later, what was going on? I listened to Wes Cecil, but before, yeah, I was reading a lot. So there was, I started studying the concept of duty. I went for a walk and made some questions about duty. Then I came home, found few articles. I was reading articles about moral responsibilities and special obligations on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Later, I read an article on Wikipedia. I found a book about duty written by Cicero. It's actually called On Duty. And I started reading this book. And also I read some other books. I worked on vocabulary.com. And at the end of the day, I was listening to Wes Cecil's audiobooks and comments on Zarathustra. So that was my day. And I usually do it every day. And now I tried to get through my actions, so to describe what I was doing. But when I accomplish this exercise, I often focus on one or another action. So let's suppose John Searle. So and I'm trying to think about it in details. I ask myself what exactly I can remember from this lecture. How would I describe it? What was going on? Like, was it interesting? What did I feel while watching this lecture? How it helped me to understand better what I'm doing. And yeah, I usually go, like, it takes sometimes 15, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes it may take an hour to think about, like, to summarize the entire day. And it's so easy for me to describe all of this, to use good language. I often find sufficient vocabulary almost for everything. But whenever I talk about metaphysics, so whenever I try to discuss some ideas which aren't clear for me, for myself, yeah, I get in trouble, but I want to talk about these things. So this is exactly how I understand them, how I learned these ideas, how I develop the understanding. First, I don't know anything, I don't understand anything, but then I go slowly, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Then I make some mistakes, say some stupid things. Then I understand that these things were said because there was some misunderstanding. But after saying these things, I realize better why I actually said something, and then I see like how my mind works, and later I create a better vision, better understanding of what's going on. But first, again, you get through all sorts of troubles by making lots of mistakes, and it's okay. I mean, even if I say something stupid, who cares? There's only like it's the only way to get through all this mess, philosophical mess, which were created for all these thousands of years. There's so much in language. When we think about the world, and as I said, I don't like to divide the world in two parts, like this physical world and metaphysical world. But basically, for purposes of simplicity, yeah, we may say that there are two worlds. So the first world is the world of our senses. So everything what we see, what we touch, what we feel, what we smell, what we taste is one world. And another world is the metaphysical, which is again not metaphysical, it's linguistic world. So everything related to language. It describes the real world, but it's actually bigger than the real world. Well, it's not bigger, it's just a augmented reality. And this reality is as huge as the real world itself. So when we travel in this world, what we do? We just go from one country to another, or from one continent to another, or from one planet to another. But when we travel in metaphysical world, so you basically go from one language to another, from one thinker to another, from one set of ideas to another, and you learn them, you understand them. Then you may build your own, sets of ideas and develop your own understanding of the world. You may create your own metaphysical world. Nobody, that's what's exciting about this world. That in this physical world, you can't actually. Oh, you may create empires, you may create cultures, states, some philosophies, religions, sciences. You may work with people, organize communities, or do some business, but it's so restricted and limited, especially because there are lots of individuals who compete with each other, and competition is kind of cruel. And especially when we talk about building states or building religions, it's unbelievably cruel. So if you want to build a new religion, first of all, there are countless religions exist already now, and there are so many people. And if you build a new religion, you have to oppose it to other religions, and hey, it's almost it leads to warfare, and it's not. It's probably not a good idea, but it may be a good idea. Again, depends on personality. But if you want to build your like metaphysical world, your metaphysics, your but also like in some sense they're all interconnected. If you build a beautiful, amazing, magnificent metaphysics, so then basically if you create meaning out of words, out of ideas, combine these ideas in some peculiar, subtle, sophisticated manner, people will actually at some moment they'll certainly get to your world, and they'll start looking what was going on, what's like, especially if it gives some metaphysical value, which is again, it's like you improve your language. That's like metaphysical value. It's all about learning somebody else's views, somebody else's perspectives, understanding what's going on in other heads, not only in your head. And of course, now again, competition is unbelievably tense since so many people create their metaphysical world. So you go on YouTube and there are millions of channels. Everybody talks about all sorts of crops. You go, on Amazon.com, there are billions of books written by all sorts of people. And why the hell should I read your book if I can just take, the most wisest books written by sages and read them? But creating, that's the idea. So creating, it's different from, there's some purposes for creating. One purpose is you create it for yourself. So you create your metaphysical world, like what I'm doing right now here. So I basically work with language and I do it for myself. I see how can I apply it for my personal stream of consciousness, that it always flows in some, places where I can enjoy myself. I can enjoy what's going on. And yeah, I do it for myself. If it may be interested for somebody else, welcome. Go and watch some stuff, read some stuff. We can even have a real conversation yeah, which may have lots of sense. But anyway, yeah, I'm doing it for myself and I like it. And I'm not trying to dogmatize here. I'm not trying to say that whatever I'm doing, it's everybody should do the same, or you have to follow me and listen to what I'm saying and change your life, do certain things to be a good person, to be a good individual, write every day, read Aristotle and Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and Kant and Hegel and Locke and Hume and Descartes and Spinoza and Plato and Feuerbach and Fichte. So no, I'm not. You may do that, you may not. Who cares? It all depends on language. Yeah, but this idea of building kind of linguistical world and borrowing uh, certain, like when you borrow an idea or somebody else's not just an idea, but kind of description of an idea, and put it in your linguistical world. So you build actually on somebody else's ideas, but is there something that belong to you personally? It's very hard to say that there is some, but in my experience, it's like I perfectly understand that this stream of consciousness, it's unique. There's no way to to repeat it. That's why it's so funny also, to make mistakes and say something completely incomprehensible. Since when you do that, you understand that this is kind of unique way of looking at the reality, and nobody else is going to be able to repeat it. Well, somebody will do something similar, but eventually, like this whole transformation is just one way of looking at the world, one way of looking at what's going on. And the question is, how can you, build something really magnificent? That's what I'm trying to do. That's like I'm trying to combine the most brilliant ideas which were developed throughout human history and apply it to my personal experience. So to see what I'm doing, to understand myself better, and to develop the greatest language, the greatest possible language. Yeah, to build something like to, you know, but it's not only also, it's not only about building something. It's more, yeah, I don't even know what is it about. I guess I'll figure out later. So now let's move on. Perhaps, but who wishes to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? For that investigation, one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have other tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those hitherto prevalent, philosophers of the dangerous perhapses. In every sense of the term, And to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers beginning to appear. So essentially, now let's consider the whole paragraph, like from here to there. Essentially, the idea in this paragraph. What is the idea? The idea is that those values which people had in the middle of 19th century, before the industrial revolution and scientific revolution actually had changed the common understanding of reality. So since 19th century, once again, there was no Einstein, there was no physics as we understand it now. There was no serious math. And most of scientists were totally dependent on religion. They couldn't even say anything against it. And morality was, to talk, to have conversations on a institutional level about morality and talk about, relevance, talk about, what's the word? Relevance and morality, objective morality, or to attack objective morality and say that, all of this is social construct and it has nothing to do with eternal truth or with absolute truth. It may be a good exercise to practice virtue and to practice, decency, integrity, whatever. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's absolute truth. And then, as I said, in the middle of 19th century, so whoever tries to say that, whoever tries to present evil as not evil, yeah, he gets in trouble. Nobody takes him or her serious. Now it's different. Now it's different. So now people have all sorts of conversations, and maybe it's gonna change in the future. Who knows? But Nietzsche wants to say that, guys, all of your philosophers is just worship. It's just worshiping certain ideals which are not real. That's the problem. So it's not the problem that, these ideals, these are stupid ideals. I guess Nietzsche doesn't want to say that, we shouldn't be good, we shouldn't be, moral, or we shouldn't be generous. All he wants to say is just, all your ideals, they're not real. So all you people are deluded. When you say, be a good person, be a kind person, like, look at yourself. Are you a good person? Are you a kind person? Nietzsche say, you are a fucking idiot. You're a hypocrite. Like, you're saying stuff which makes no sense, since you don't follow your own, what's the word, shibboleth. Yeah, you have all these virtuous shibboleths, but look around you. Like, nobody actually gives a fuck, and you don't give a fuck in the first place. And look at me, Nietzsche. I give a fuck. I mean, I care. I'm a good person. But, I'm a good person, not because I follow your stupid advice, but because I understand what's going on. I'm not trying to idealize nature. I'm not trying to idealize human society. I'm trying to say what's really here. And when I understand what's really here, I don't need to, go and dogmatize and teach you that you must follow a certain path. I understand why I shouldn't do that, but I don't, I don't do it blindlessly. Okay, so again, the idea of, goodness and generosity, he wants to say all these ideas are fabricated. and based on nothing. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for them. It means that what's going on is not the same as what we want to be. And to change it, we have to change what's going on. We shouldn't like just make more and more ideals. Yeah, I guess essentially, yeah, and eventually he said that, new philosophers, so those who will come and destroy all these morals, so who will come and say, all your Christianity, all your moralization, dogmatisms, so it's time to get rid of it. It's time to get rid and build a new philosophy, which is going to be based on, whatever. Yeah, whether he's right or not, who knows what's going on. Yeah, in Christianity there were important values, and assuming that it evolved out of Platonism and later Stoicism, there may be both way. Like now, for example, it's there's so many different ways of looking at one and the same phenomenon. So, for example, when we talk about Christianity, what Nietzsche meant by Christianity wasn't what somebody else will mean by Christianity. Since for Nietzsche, it was a certain set of values, and mostly these values were attributes of people who haven't who didn't have these values, who tried to pretend that they were good people, and who tried to pretend that they were selfless and did something for other people, but in reality it was just an illusion, a pretense, an appearance, whereas inside they all were selfish and what, jealous, and eventually stupid. And Nietzsche was in appearance different. So in appearance, he was like, a devil, let's say. But inside, he was the most, honorable, noble, and kind person. Kind of paradox. So whenever you see a person who tries to pretend that he is a bad person, he is usually a good person. Whenever you see a person who tries to pretend that he is a good person, he is inside a motherfucker. See, yeah. And again, now what we see, like all these values and ideals, where are all those values? Who knows? Now we have different philosophers, different schools, and essentially we have the internet, and we may build our own values and our own ideas. Why should we listen to other people? Well, of course, when you are 10 years old, it's probably better for you to listen to other people. But when you like study deeply certain religious ideas, philosophies, science, so you may come up with an idea that, yeah, individualism in science is also possible. So your ethics, it shouldn't be judged by whatever you say, but whatever you do. And in linguistic or metaphysical world, there must be it should be open for discussion, for debates. When we try to restrict people or limit them and say you shouldn't think about God, or you shouldn't think about certain principles, they're intrinsic, and if you want to have good life, you have to follow them. You shouldn't question them. And for Nietzsche, no, it's not the case. And for us, probably it's also not the case nowadays. we have to understand that. No, you may question everything. The point is, who are you, and are you really able to question anything? Since you may say, yeah, I've read Nietzsche, like I haven't read anything before. I found this, beyond good and evil, or thus spake Zarathustra. I've read it, and now I go and question all these values and whatever. Yeah. Try to do that and see what's going to happen. I mean, understanding of both sides is still crucial here. So in philosophy, in studying language and different cultural perspectives and different ideas in psychology, so it's crucial to understand both sides. When we just look at one side and say, okay, let's abandon all gods and all principles and do whatever we like, well, yeah, it may lead to certain consequences, unintended and probably bad consequences. To know both sides, yeah, it's like it gives us a better guideline for our actions. But do actually our actions depend on whatever we read? Another good question. But anyways, I was talking for a couple of hours, a little bit less, but doesn't matter. So I'm gonna stick to my schedule, at least for now, to read at least one paragraph a week. So next paragraph is quite short, and yeah, I'm gonna remember it at once, and then I'm gonna read the whole paragraph and talk about it. Yeah, I want to maintain kind of short. I want to shorten my videos, my streams to 1 hour, probably 1.5 hour, and make them more regularly, maybe 2 times a week. I don't know. It's certainly I have a desire to do more of them and to talk more clearly. I mean, there's too much unnecessary things. I understand that, but it helps me to figure out what's going on. I mean, if I just read a sentence and say a few words about it, if I don't go aside, I probably will be able to understand it better and, share my understanding, my views, whatever. But it's not as exciting as, just observing your stream of consciousness when it's directed at certain ideas. So for me, what's more like this entire process of reading the text and observing my stream of consciousness, even though it gets aside and I often just interpret something in a completely unrelated manner. For me, it's more exciting and valuable than just interpret it and trying to be as clear as possible. Even though I'm trying to be as clear as possible, it's not the main goal here. So I have different, different goals attached to this exercise. Ultimately, I think that it helps me to improve my memory. It helps me to improve my attention. It helps me to understand certain, certain ideas which I want to understand better. And another goal, it's like it's easy for me to remember the entire paragraph. It doesn't take a lot of time, and I even may use it, but I don't want to use, like, let's suppose there is a conversation about good and evil, and I want to present some ideas from this paragraph. So in one case, I may just recite the entire paragraph and, just impress the opponent. And on the other side, I may just take some ideas like the belief in antithesis of values, or, the difference between truth and, or like, different opposites, like, how how can anything originate out of its opposite. So I may even try to use these modes of reasoning and modes of valuation to see how my opponent understands the issue. And yeah, as I said, in one case I may just cite the whole paragraph, but in the other I may just take some ideas and just talk about these ideas if it's necessary. And when I go slowly and read each sentence, and I try to analyze certain expressions, like again, antithesis of values or superficial estimates, and popular valuations and antithesis of value, or the unselfish, the positive, the truth versus the will to delusion, selfishness, pretense, and cupidity, or the turmoil of delusion and cupidity, or the lap of being, the intransitive, transitive, the concealed God, the thing in itself. Like all these expressions are useful in no, not just in conversations, but in thinking as well. So often I find myself thinking about these philosophical dichotomies and trying to understand how it affects my life, what impact it makes on my life, does it make in my life. And yeah, often I just find 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 it useful to borrow some expressions and develop my thoughts and stream of consciousness based on these on these ideas. Try to like take this paragraph, let's say, summarize it in one or two sentences, and then kind of rewrite it on my own. So how would I, like, assuming that there is one idea which is presented in this paragraph. So, and this idea is the belief in antithesis of values, which metaphysicians of all time have, and presenting their type of reasoning and providing some doubts about this type of reasoning and doubts about antithesis of values, and basically saying that what you consider good and bad maybe all just neutral, or good may be like bad may be better than good. So that's now if I want to develop the same idea, how would I put it? Like what kind of logic and reasoning would I use? How would I rewrite the same paragraph? And since I already have it in my mind, so I may just one thing is just to replace or all these expressions. So just say, how could anything originate out of its opposite? Okay, how could I put it in like different words? Is it possible for one thing to emerge out of opposite? How to change the word opposite? What's the synonym for opposite? It's antithesis, right? Anyway, so an interesting exercise. If you're somebody who watches my videos, you may try to do the same. You shouldn't take any book which I recommend you. You just may find your own book. But see, the idea is exercise itself. So I'm going to be dead like in 50, 60, 100 years. And whatever I may write or present as a philosophy, everything what I like, all my experience, is not as important as the activity itself. So the activity, what I do, is what's really matter. The final conclusions, my texts, my poems, my philosophy, it's nothing. So if I wanna, like, let's suppose I live now in 1090, let's say. So I'm already dead like this person, but I want to be a philosopher, and I want to study philosophy and get sense of what it means to be a real philosopher. And let's suppose that I, like Vladimir Svitashev, achieved something that Nietzsche achieved 100 years ago, or how many 150 years ago. So I wrote some amazing books. Everybody knows my books, and people are talking about me and praising me and saying that I was the greatest philosopher of 21st century, whatever. So, and you want to do philosophy, you shouldn't just take everything I wrote and said uh, as kind of absolute truth. What you should do, and it's going to be me, see the idea. It's like this 29, 90 or 21, 10, 21, 20, 21, 50. It's like doing philosophy means doing work. So thinking for oneself. And thinking for oneself, of course, the more books, the more philosophical books you read, the better. But essentially, the idea is just 1 hour a day or few hours a day, sitting and thinking and analyzing your own stream of consciousness, doing certain. This is one of like working on your memory, on your attention and imagination, making lots of exercises to improve them. And this exercise which I do is just an exercise, but it's extremely powerful. Just taking one book which you think is the most important book in philosophy and getting through it slowly, talking about it, recording, studying streams. Why it's important? If you do it alone, if you do it for yourself, if you just read the book and think about it, it's not so powerful as when you do it and you kind of you share what you do, you think aloud, you allow yourself to be vulnerable. Like now I'm very vulnerable, but it's what changes my brain. So you may to better understand how it works, go and watch Andrew Huberman's podcast about neuroplasticity and what actually does neuroplasticity, like what makes it work, especially if you are old. I mean, yeah, in philosophy, I guess philosophy starts exactly at the moment when your neuroplasticity is no longer so plastic. I mean, like the age of 25 or close to this age. And then to change your brain, you have to do certain things which you don't need to do if you are young. But when you are young, you're mostly preoccupied with different activities. Philosophy starts later in life. But anyway, as I said, yeah, what's important, again, this exercise, it's amazing. I see its effect and I'm going to continue doing that. So just taking a book, memorizing some articles, some paragraphs, reading them and thinking aloud for an hour, for a couple of hours, not being concerned with what other people think of you. That's the worst thing. There's lots of people who watch my videos, and say it's just, they don't watch them since they think they have no value. Lots like people whom I communicate, they don't like, I communicate with them each week and they don't give a fuck about my videos since they think they have no value. And when I ask them like, would you like to do something like that, they basically, they can't even write a page about about our speaking clubs. And I don't blame anybody. I don't want to say like, these people are bad people. I want to say that sometimes I have a feeling that there's some motivation or some drive inside me, and I want to prove to these people something. Say, it's like, it has value. This exercise is good, and it's all useless. Talking to these people is useless. So now, like what I have to understand myself, that it only makes sense to talk about something with somebody who does the same thing. And when somebody does the same thing, it's easier to see what's really like, does this person understands what's going on or not. It's like playing video games, essentially. So if we play, let's say, Warcraft or Starcraft, and we want to talk about Warcraft or Starcraft, it makes no sense to talk about with somebody who haven't played Starcraft, right? So now we have a conversation about, what's race is better, Zerk or Protoss or Terran. Yeah. It's impossible to have a conversation with somebody who haven't played StarCraft. And the same with linguistics, with philosophy. So I have to concern myself only with those people who actually do philosophy, not with people who just, lay people who doesn't care about anything rather than their, money, girlfriend, family, whatever, pleasure, acceptance. Yeah, but often again, I find some kind of, I have to work on it. I want to work and I will work on it. I mean, to reduce this anxiety, or I don't know how to put it clearly, annoyance probably. Since it influences my performance. So I want to perform with excellence. So I want to read this, this book and talk about it such as in the end I'll enjoy it. Now it's still hard, so I don't enjoy it. I see that most of what I say is irrelevant. For purposes of practicing language, it's okay. For purposes of practicing pronunciation, learning new words, new ideas, it's okay. But for purposes of doing philosophy, it's not okay. And I try to be better, but I have to get rid of certain influence, like certain prejudices which I have, which I am aware of on an intellectual level, but on a physiological level, they are still in me. So I may say, yeah, I don't care about what people think of me and what I'm saying. And I really don't care. And I act as if I didn't care. Since I record my videos, I see, they're stupid, but I still publish them and I don't care like what people will say essentially. And they don't say anything usually. But it's just an intellectual. On a physical level, I still have some emotions which show me that I care. So now I worry. I see there's, there's no, there's some, I don't know how to describe it, but in the physical, I still feel some discomfort. I still feel some sort of awkwardness and embarrassment. I may ignore it, so I may not mention it and go on and read and talk about what's going on, what I'm reading, without being obsessed with these emotions. But and maybe later they will just disappear. But I want to analyze them. I want to know, why do I really care? Why my body produces all these emotions and all these. What's the reason for that? Is it like self-delusion? I'm trying to be somebody else, or is it something related to my relationship with people, or what is it? Well, I'll find out. But anyway, yeah, exercise. Yeah, as you can see, said if you really want to do the same, you may start like the earlier you start, the better. But you may see, like let's next time I'm gonna start the video from reciting the preface and the first few paragraphs from my memory. So I memorized all this in less than a month. It didn't take a lot of time, just self-control, self-discipline, and that's all. Self-control and self-discipline. I guess the amount of time which an average person spends on checking social networks each week is enough if you are able to get rid of your habit. So if you want to, essentially, if you want to control your impulses, your instincts, your, whatever you do when you check out your social networks like Instagram, VK, whatever, YouTube, Facebook. So may you spend each day probably I all people are different. I spend like almost no time, maybe a few minutes a day, and it still bothers me a lot, even a few minutes a day. So when I just check out my social networks without no purpose, at the end of the day I feel terrible. Yesterday I tried to avoid, like I made a categorical imperative not to go on VK and not to check my email. I didn't do that, and at the end of the day I felt awesome. And now I'm gonna develop this practice. But yeah, my goal, my point is here. My point here is that developing your memory and your attention, practicing the self-control, uh, the amount of energy we spend every week on social networks, if we spend the same amount of energy working on our language and memorizing some ideas, maybe poems, maybe songs, maybe some text which we like, it may be some concepts from Wikipedia or from any other, like from Oxford Dictionary, whatever. Just memorizing and repeating them from time to time, analyzing them, thinking about them. It's the same amount of energy. In one case, you spend it on social networks, it doesn't bring you anything. Or maybe it brings you, anxiety and dissatisfaction and all sorts of things which you don't want to have. And on the other hand, you spend the same, like every time when you have an urge to check out your social network, you basically take a piece of paper and you memorize one or two sentences. Next time you have an urge, like one sentence, yeah, you may start from just one simple sentence. So you may find the text which you like. Let's suppose maybe this book. If you're listening to me right now, probably this book is important for you and it makes sense for you. So you take just one sentence, supposing that Truth is a woman. All right. So next time you have an urge to check your social network, instead of doing that, you go and memorize another sentence. And each time you do that, eventually at the end of the day, if you usually check out your social network 10 times a day, you'll remember 10 sentences. And it's something like this. See, next day you remember even more. Well, of course, it's not as no, it's not as easy. Probably the first for the first few days, it's gonna be inspiring, and you may do that. But then you get back and check your social networks compulsively even more than you did before. It's kind of battle and struggle, which usually takes lots of time. It's like you can't do it overnight. It may take a year to reduce your compulsivity and to get rid of your stupid addictions and like apply your intelligence for something that may be better. Anyway, so talking too much, it's time to finish. As I said, next time I'm gonna start and I'm gonna show you how it works. So I'm not showing off, I'm just showing you what may be possible if you do what I do, if you listen to what I say and try to use the same exercises for development of your personality, of your intelligence, of your language. So I'm going to read this from my memory next time, all this at once. And then I'm going to go on and, probably I'm going to read this thing as well, since I'm going to memorize it in the next few days. Well, I mean, I'm going to memorize it probably today, but to repeat it a few times, I need to repeat it a few times in order to, to read it from memory without, usually when I memorize it, first it takes 5-10 repetitions, like 1-2 times a day, to get it clear, to read it clearly, without mistakes, without pauses for, you know, few seconds, remembering this or that word. Anyway, have to stop. So see you next time. Bye bye.